Hello everyone, my name is Sabine König, I am a psychotherapist and this is my podcast, Overcoming Depression with Love. And today I have dared to tackle a really big topic, namely to give an overview about the phenomenon of depression. It is an attempt to define depression, and because it is so complex and can be viewed from so many different perspectives, I have made a list of 10 out of it. And if you are interested in hearing 10 different definitions of depression from me, then stay tuned. Welcome to Seelenklopfen. First of all, yes, I went to the hairdresser. Trying something new more often is good for the soul. I can highly recommend it. So here comes my list of 10, my attempt at a definition of the term depression. And I think in a way it's also a summary of many individual videos that I have already published on my channel. And to give you a bit of an overview, I will now present my list of 10 to you. Point 1. Depression is the failed attempt to be normal. So, I have already mentioned this in a video. I think the video was called something like Extreme Adaptation, or Are You Desperately Trying to Be Normal? It is the attempt to adapt to this completely sick society, to function within it, to meet all demands, to please everyone. And this attempt must fail because it is simply not possible. So basically, if you look at it from this perspective, depression is a healing retreat from a world that has gone mad. That's essentially how you can see it. So you really should critically question what is going on with this society. And I already mentioned in one video, basically, it's not that we, the depressed, are the sick ones, but rather the society is sick. And if we fail to adapt to it and function within it, we develop symptoms. But actually, it is completely healing to simply withdraw from it and reconnect with yourself instead of constantly trying to function here, even though it's no longer possible because the demands have become too high. And if you feel like you can't manage it, then you are completely normal. There is nothing wrong with you. You are perfectly fine. Point 2. Depression is the result of suppressed emotions and past traumas. This is a very important component of the definition of depression, namely, if you have no suppressed emotions, no traumas, and nothing inside you because your whole life has been perfect up until now, which is impossible, then you won't get depressed. So, there are just so many possibilities of what can go wrong in such a childhood. Most often, it is emotional neglect. That is, you did not receive the love and attention you actually needed and deserved, or that you were emotionally or even physically mistreated or abused, that you perhaps went to the opposite extreme, or your parents did, by overprotecting you. I've also made a video about that before. It could also be that due to overprotection, you didn't have the opportunity to find your strength, your self-efficacy, and that you couldn't develop sufficient self-worth and therefore fall into these negative thought patterns. You got caught up in it, that you developed too little resilience, too little strength, because there's still so much frozen life energy inside you from back then, from traumas. And they don't have to have been big things. Even the small things, if there were a lot of them, set a lot of frozen life energy inside you. And it gets fuller and fuller inside you, and then your range of movement becomes more and more restricted. You get more and more fears, and eventually you don't even know where to go with yourself. Your body develops symptoms. Your soul develops symptoms, and so on. And then it can happen that you develop depression from it. Point 3 of the attempt at a definition of depression. Depression is the reward for being good. Many people with depression have a fundamental feeling, which they may not even be consciously aware of, but perhaps they are, that they are somehow bad, that they are guilty, that they have to make amends for something. And this absolute desire to be good, to be loved, to be safe, is something that can lead to the suppression of aggression. So depression is often related to this that aggression, yes, that it is swept under the rug because there is such a great fear of expressing it, because then one might no longer be loved, no longer be good. And that is not healthy because these aggressions are there and they have to go somewhere. And then they turn inward. And I have already made a video about passive aggressiveness. Maybe you can watch it again. So basically, depression is the deep exhaustion. After years of inner struggle against your own aggressions, against your own inner resistances, because you constantly do things you actually don't want to do, conforming, always being nice to others, always taking care of others. And this leads to an inner resistance that is very exhausting. Or that could be defined as depression. If you've had too much of that against your own needs and so on, then depression can develop from it. Point number 4. Depression is the result of years of self-denial. You have betrayed your heart. You have not paid attention to your needs. You have neglected your self-care. For too long, you only took care of others. And the main thing was that others were doing well. But not myself. That's just how it is. This can partly be related to, for example, if you are highly sensitive by nature, that you simply cannot bear it when others are doing poorly, because you would have to empathize so strongly, since you were conditioned in your childhood to perceive the feelings of others more strongly than your own. That's why you naturally always try to ensure that others are doing well rather than yourself, because otherwise you couldn't endure it. This is such a typical phenomenon that can lead to depression. And this then leads to a completely wrongly lived life in a disharmony within yourself, because you focus more on others than on yourself. So one could say depression is the result of a wrongly lived life, a series of wrong decisions made against yourself for others. And I can only tell you, you are the most important person in your life. And if you haven't lived like that until now, then you can change that now. Definition number 5. Depression is the feeling of lacking self-efficacy. This is something that many children learn already in the nursery, that they, let's say, do not always have all their needs met in the first year of life, and then scream until someone comes, or if no one comes, or however it happens, they have the feeling, well, nothing helps here. I can do whatever I want here. I can express my needs however I want. No one comes. It all doesn't help. This is a fundamental feeling that many experience throughout their entire childhood. And then feelings like helplessness, dependency, and powerlessness develop. Such a victim mentality usually develops very early in childhood. And if it is not resolved, then it remains, and then it persists into adulthood. And this is a fundamental feeling for many people with depression. And from this arises a life full of unseen possibilities, full of unmade decisions and unused opportunities, and so on. And then something like fears develops. Fears that go so far that one eventually doesn't dare to step out the door, that the whole life becomes increasingly restricted, so that one sees fewer and fewer possibilities. And the path to healing would look like this. That one understands depression as an invitation to return to one's own creative power, to let go of victim thinking, to recognize that helplessness was only learned, that it is not real, that it is an illusion. That's how it is. That's one way to define depression, and that's how you get out of it again. Point 6 of the attempt to define depression. Depression is an out-of-balance body-soul-mind system. It was important to me not to only mention mental and emotional topics, but also to include the body in one point, because it belongs to it. You must not leave it out completely. So let's say depression is often associated with a feeling of lack, of burden, of like an inner poisoning. And this occurs on all 3 levels, including the physical level. And it's important to keep that in mind and also approach it from that perspective. For example, when I talk about inner poisoning, it could mean environmental toxins, poor nutrition, pesticides, cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation, and so on. we are already exposed to strong toxins and should actually be constantly taking care to detoxify our liver if we take medication and all such things. But inner poisoning also happens through negative thoughts, through constant self-condemnation, through resentment, hatred, through being unable to forgive and such things. So this is something that occurs on all levels. And also this feeling of lack. I have too little, I get too little. That is a feeling, in most cases, that's not true at all, because you can look at it differently. You could also be grateful for everything you have, but you focus on the lack. And this also takes place, among other things, on the physical level. For example, having a deficiency in certain nutrients, that the hormonal balance is disrupted, the brain metabolism, as conventional medicine basically defines it purely biologically. Depression is a brain metabolism that is out of sync, serotonin deficiency and all such things. And you have to keep that in mind as well. It can be a deficiency of sunlight, or fresh air, exercise, because you isolate yourself and just sit at home. And that certainly doesn't make it better, because exercise in the fresh air is good for the body, for the immune system, for the soul, and for stress reduction, for example. And above all, a lack of love, of self-love. That's another thing. So it is a body, soul, mind system that has fallen out of sync, and we need to consider these three levels simultaneously and together. Point 7. Depression is an invitation to become aware. This includes, for example, quite simply put, an invitation to further education, so that you engage with the really, really important things, not always just with what you learned in school and training with some numbers or something like that. If you have an office job somewhere, there are more important things out there. Read books about personal development, where it's about how one can become happy. It is an invitation to further education, for inner processes of realization, through reflection, through feeling inward, mindfulness and meditation. Basically, you are encouraged to engage with yourself, with your inner life, and to become aware of what this life is really about. So, perhaps you should ask yourself some big questions. Why am I actually in this world? What is the purpose of my life? And that you expand your limited worldview a bit, that you catch yourself where you might be sitting in a mental prison. I've already made videos about that, 2 different ones. I can link them again, so that you realize, where am I limiting myself in my possibilities? Why am I here? What do I actually want here? In order to possibly make a correction, and that naturally includes catching yourself with your beliefs. So the think with think prison essentially refers to the limited belief system. I'm not good enough, I should actually do this and that, I'm not right because, and the world is evil, an unsafe place, and blah, blah, blah. Yes, so that's everything that makes you sick, and that can be changed. Point number 8. Depression is the call to return to love for yourself. Self-love is a very important key to healing from depression. Or viewed differently, lack of self-love is one of the most important reasons for the development of depression. It's about you being called now to return to your true self, to recognize who you really are, and also to return to the 3 general keys to healing. I made a separate video about that, which I can highly recommend to you, namely the 3 points: awareness, gratitude, and love, that you get used to in your everyday life, as in to think and become aware of. Yes, as already mentioned in the previous point, what is this really about? It's always about learning something here, that I can return to myself and realize that in truth I am love, and not this failure or everything else I usually condemn myself for. It's about raising your vibration by returning to love, returning to self-love, by showing understanding, by starting to accept yourself as you are, to accept what is currently within you. All of this leads you back to love, and it leads to raising your vibration by, yes, correcting your self-image. Earlier, we talked about the worldview that can be corrected, And now you can also correct your self-image, because you probably have a rather negative self-image if you are in depression. Point number 9. Depression is an invitation to correction of your life path to fulfill your soul's plan. Here it is about the perspective from a spiritual viewpoint, which, in my opinion, is often neglected in most therapies. So I find I simply experience it repeatedly in my practice, that people come to me who are at such a crossroads where they realize that the life they have lived up to now was perhaps okay at the beginning, but now they notice they are on the wrong path. I am living in the wrong place, I am in the wrong profession, in the wrong job, and living with the wrong people, with the wrong partner. It might be about your soul wishing for you to finally do what you originally came here to do. Unfortunately, we keep forgetting that before we incarnate here, we have a specific plan. Not so detailed, of course. We still have the choice here of what we want to do. But in a very rough sense, we have a plan beforehand. We as a soul, what we want to experience, what we want to learn, what we want to remember again, what we want to let go of here, and so on. For this, we have been equipped with perfect abilities. Either we have brought them with us, or we have acquired them through our life path, through our challenges. And if we continue to refuse to fulfill this soul plan, because it would involve changes, stepping out of the comfort zone, oh God, how am I supposed to change my profession? Yes, then symptoms appear, and then the symptoms remain. And I have experienced it repeatedly, even with myself. To step out of the comfort zone and detach from something that no longer serves you well, even though it was familiar to you and provided security, and stepping into something new, even though it initially means uncertainty, after a short bumpy transition phase, it ultimately becomes something that pulls you out of depression or an anxiety disorder, whatever it may be. Yes, so depression here stands as a representative for depression, burnout. Whether you have panic attacks or not, in the end, it's not such a big difference. It's simply a different symptomatology that often goes hand in hand and is interconnected. Yes, symptoms disappear when you adjust these crucial levers and perhaps do what you came here to do. So find out what you came here for. And finally, the point, then, depression is a habit and can be retrained. Here I would like to mention the great Dr. Joe Dispenza, who has made a very significant contribution with his insights from brain research to how healing can also work, namely through changing habits in the brain. So thinking, feeling, and behaving in a depressive way, these are habits, especially because it's such a long story. One is often in depression for a longer time. And then it happens that the hardware up here, all the neural connections, adjust to depressive thinking, depressive feeling, and then huge, thick, fat neural pathways have been created. A hardware that makes it easier for you to think and feel depressively over and over again without much energy expenditure. So if you no longer want that, then you have to retrain your brain. This also has material reasons because, for example, we become addicted to stress hormones. Then we want to have this inner stress again and again. We become addicted to drama, to terrible stories. We keep telling you our terrible stories over and over again. This also has real neurophysiological reasons that we become addicted to it. And we should know this, keep it in mind, and then really work on retraining ourselves every day. It is possible. It's just like anything else you learn anew, where new neural pathways first have to be created. So no matter what skills, and that's just how it is. So through meditation with Dr. Joe, it's meditation, or through EFT, which is what I do, or through all sorts of tools and techniques, you can train yourself to change that again and again, mentally going into what you want to have and no longer into what you don't want to have. And through that, a new hardware and a new software, so to speak, are created up here, if I may compare it like that. With these terms, they are created, they are newly formed. And if you reinforce it and keep reinforcing it, then it eventually becomes easy for you, like learning to play the piano. I always compare it to that. If you have repeated it for years, then it becomes easy for you, and then you sit down and play, and it doesn't cost you any energy anymore. At the beginning, you have to expend a bit of energy and practice it, and go against the inner resistances that always say, no, that's not right, that's not right. When you imagine what you would like to have, then you have to push through once, and then once you have retrained it, it runs on its own. Then the positive thoughts run on their own. For me, it's like this, for example. I wake up in the morning and have positive thoughts. I wasn't born with it, and I had it differently for decades. I simply trained myself to do it, and now it comes easily to me. So raise the vibration level also by adjusting the brain frequencies. If you delve into Dr. Joe's work more closely, you'll discover many fascinating things about how you can influence your brain to easily unlearn depression. So out of survival mode into the regeneration and creation mode. Those were my 10 definitions of depression. Now, I'm very curious about numbers 11 to 20, which you are welcome to write in the comments. What is depression for you? These were 10 points that I know from my own experience and from my clients. But there are certainly many other aspects as well. And I'm very curious about what you have to even say about it. I always appreciate comments, likes, sharing, and subscribing to my channel. If you want to support what I do, you feed the algorithm so that I am suggested to even more people, and I would be very grateful to you for that. Now, I wish you a wonderful day. See you then. Goodbye.